Hello, and welcome once again to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet corner of the cosmos where thoughts drift like leaves upon still water, and knowledge hums gently in the background of your night. Tonight, we begin a slow and lingering journey into one of the most elusive ideas science has ever tried to hold. Time. Not the ticking hands on a clock, but the vast current that carries your days, shapes your memories, and quietly folds your life into motion. If you listen closely, and perhaps tilt your imagination just a little, you may even sense that time isn't only something we move through, but something that might move through us. So let's take it slowly. Because time, in all its mystery, is not what hurries us forward, it's what allows us to move at all. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see the many places we gather from, each of us in our own little slice of time. Now, feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's begin our slow journey together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Before we settle in too deeply, let me ask, have you ever watched a cup of tea steam in the late afternoon light? The rising wisps twist and vanish, and without noticing, you've seen time. Not in the hands of a clock, not in numbers ticking forward, but in change itself. The tea was hot, now it is cooler. The steam was present, now it has disappeared. That flow, that becoming, is time's most familiar voice. When we speak of time travel, we sometimes picture machines spinning, portals glowing, or a sudden pop into another century. But here, at the very start, it's helpful to remember that every sip you take, every shadow that stretches across your floor, every heartbeat that follows another, these are already the smallest steps through time. Time travel, in its simplest truth, is just being alive, carried forward by change. And yet, there is a deeper question, one that lingers like a quiet hum behind every science fiction story and every late-night thought. Could there be more? Could time be walked through like a hallway, entered and exited at will? Could someone from another when sit across from you in the cafe tomorrow morning, their watch ticking from a different century? The scientist's answer must be both cautious and curious. We'll travel there together, calmly, using the best of what physics, biology, and even our own dreaming minds can say. But before we can ask whether travellers from other eras are strolling beside us, we need to settle into the present. And here's the first secret. The present isn't what you think it is. You might imagine it as a thin razor's edge slicing the past from the future. But in lived experience, the present has thickness. Your brain, in its patient and somewhat messy way, gathers signals from your eyes, your ears, your skin, your muscles, and stitches them together into a small window of now. That stitching takes a fraction of a second, and the result is that your present is not a mathematical instant, but a soft cushion, about 2 or 3 seconds wide. In that small hammock of time, your consciousness swings gently. You do not experience the world in precise instants, but in brief spans where things seem to belong together. The clap of a drum, the swing of your arm, the call of a bird, they're gathered into a seamless moment, even though their signals arrived a little out of sync. Already, you are a kind of time traveller. Your brain patiently waits, smooths the differences, and gives you a present broad enough to hold a melody, not just a single note. Without that widening, life would be a chaos of disconnected sparks, like trying to read a book where every word was printed on a separate page and delivered one at a time. So our journey starts here, in your lived now. It is not a point, but a span. Not a nail, but a hammock. As we lie back in that hammock, let's widen our gaze. The entire sky above you is a clock. Some parts of it tick faster, others slower. The rotation of Earth gives you sunrises and sunsets. The tilt of Earth brings you seasons. The moon draws the tides. But there are other clocks, stranger ones. Pulsars, those dense remnants of exploded stars, spin hundreds of times each second, sweeping beams of light like cosmic lighthouses. They are so regular that astronomers can use them as galactic timepieces. When you look at the sky, you're not just seeing space, you're seeing history. Every star is a letter written long ago, only now arriving in your mailbox of vision. The nearest stars are postcards a few years old. The farthest galaxies are letters that took billions of years to reach you. The night sky is memory stretched across unimaginable distances. And yet, while the universe keeps time with stars and galaxies, your body keeps time with light and hormones. At dawn, cells in your brain, specifically in a tiny cluster called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, are nudged awake by the first rays. Melatonin levels fall, cortisol rises, and you feel a subtle shift toward wakefulness. At night, the process reverses and your eyelids grow heavy. Jet lag is simply your body trying to remind you that your inner clock is still set to yesterday's light. When Earth wobbles in its rotation, we even add leap seconds to keep our machines in step with the planet. Imagine it. The whole world's timekeepers pausing, adjusting, waiting together for Earth to catch her breath. Already we've touched on human clocks, cosmic clocks, and the strange width of the present moment. We've also felt how all of these pieces form the stage upon which the idea of time travel must be set. Because unless we understand what time is and how it feels from inside and outside, we cannot ask what it might mean to move differently through it. And here is where science offers its most delightful twist. Time is not absolute. It does not tick the same for everyone, everywhere. It can stretch. It can compress. It can diverge depending on speed and gravity. In the next sessions, we will explore how Einstein's insights bent our understanding into something both wondrous and unsettling. Motion slows time. Gravity bends time. Light itself acts as both the ruler and the historian of all that passes. But for now, you can let the thought rest. Time is not uniform, and even the simplest clock has a story shaped by where it is and how it moves. So, as you lie here listening, know this: you're afloat in a current that does not pause, but that carries you gently. You cannot fall out of it. You cannot lose it. And whether we find visitors from another when or not, you're already a traveller. Your past selves wave from the shore behind you. Your future self is waiting downstream. Tonight, together, we'll drift along, not hurried, not grasping, just watching how the river bends. If you close your eyes for a moment, you may notice that the world does not vanish into silence and stillness. Sounds still arrive, one after the other, but they gather together in your mind like overlapping ripples. The hum of a refrigerator, the faint traffic outside, perhaps a bird that hasn't yet fallen asleep. Each sound is slightly displaced in time, but your brain ties them into a single present. This is the first clue that the present isn't a razor-sharp point, but a kind of soft-edged meadow, a place you inhabit for a short while before moving on. The philosopher and psychologist William James once called this the specious present. It lasts only a few seconds, but it is enough to hold the threads of experience so that life feels continuous rather than broken into fragments. Think of a melody played on a piano. If each note existed for you as a strict instant, you would hear nothing more than isolated clicks, without rhythm or flow. But the brain holds the last note just long enough to let it blend with the next, and then the next, so that the tune feels whole. This is the way consciousness stretches time, not indefinitely, not backward or forward in grand leaps, but gently, within a narrow window. Your now is therefore not a single tick of the clock, but something closer to a breath. The length of that breath can change. When you're startled, your nervous system speeds up, narrowing your sense of the present into a sharp flash. Time seems to slow because your brain is processing more details within the same real-world seconds. During moments of deep calm, however, the opposite occurs. A walk at dusk when the air is quiet and golden can feel as though time has widened, as though the moment is lingering longer than usual. In truth, your body and brain are simply adjusting the size of the window through which you hold reality together. Different species experience this differently too. A fly, darting in the sunlight, lives in a quicker present than you do. Its nervous system is fast enough that the world seems to move in slow motion. That is why you can never quite swat it. It perceives your movement stretched out, as though it has more time to respond. For larger, slower creatures like elephants, the opposite may be true. Their perception of now might be stretched so broadly that the quick scurrying of small animals barely registers as individual events. The present is therefore not universal, but tuned to the rhythms of each body, each mind. In this sense, déjà vu becomes a curious glitch in the system. When the brain stitching goes slightly awry, when signals slip past each other or overlap incorrectly, you might feel as though the present moment has already happened. It is not that you're sliding between parallel worlds or visiting your past, but that your present has doubled itself, playing the same fragment twice. Dreams can create a similar effect. Have you ever woken from a dream only to encounter something that felt strangely familiar, as if you had lived it before? Your brain may have rehearsed that scene in the silent theatre of sleep, and when waking life matched it, the overlap made the present feel haunted. The widening of the present has another gift. It allows memory and anticipation to mingle. Right now, as you listen, your mind may drift to the last time you heard a calm voice in the dark, or perhaps to what you will do tomorrow when the morning light comes. Both of these driftings, backward and forward, still occur within the soft field of now. The present is therefore not just a holding place for sensory input, but a canvas on which past and future brush against one another. Without that overlap, you would be locked into pure immediacy, unable to think ahead, unable to recall behind. Science has found ways to measure this window. Experiments in psychology ask subjects to tap in rhythm with a beat, or to identify the order of flashing lights. Again and again, the results converge. The human sense of the present lasts about 2 or 3 seconds. Any shorter, and life would feel like strobe lights. Any longer, and events would smear together into confusion. The present, in other words, has just enough room for rhythm for a sentence, for the glance of a friend, for the inhale and exhale that calms your breath. Once you see the present this way, time travel takes on a softer meaning. You cannot leap centuries in an instant, but every heartbeat is already a little voyage. You live in a stitched moment, gliding from one meadow of now to the next. The river of time is not a series of thin lines, but a sequence of overlapping pools, each wide enough to hold a thought, a memory, or the first bars of a favourite song. Imagine again that hammock from earlier. You lie in it not on a single thread, but on a woven span of rope that supports you for a short while before giving way to the next length. The hammock sways, and with it, your consciousness moves forward. This is why you can dance, why you can recognize words, why you can laugh at a joke. The present must be broad enough to let pieces of information connect. Without that breadth, nothing would seem to last long enough to mean anything. So, when we ask if time travelers might walk among us, it is worth remembering that you are already one. You're carried through the present moment by moment, meadow by meadow, hammock by hammock. Each step you take is a new window stitched onto the last. And while physics will soon take us deeper, showing how motion and gravity can bend the very length of time itself, it is comforting to pause here at the beginning. The present is not a pinprick. It is a soft lantern glow, steady enough to hold your life together, wide enough to let you feel continuity, narrow enough to let you move forward without drowning in endless overlap. Hold on to that glow as we continue. Ahead lies Einstein's strange realization that not all nows are equal. That motion itself reshapes the clock, and that your hammock of consciousness is floating on a river that bends, narrows, and stretches in ways that once seemed impossible. When you wake in the morning, you may think it is the alarm clock that begins your day, or the faint light seeping through the curtains, or perhaps the aroma of coffee from the kitchen. But long before any of those signals reach you, a tiny cluster of neurons in your brain has already been preparing. Nestled just above the crossing of your optic nerves is a structure no larger than a grain of rice, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It is small, but it carries a responsibility vast enough to shape every hour you live. The SCN is your body's lantern, the keeper of your circadian rhythm, the rhythm that whispers when it is time to wake, when to eat, when to rest, and when to slip into sleep again. The SCN receives its cues from light itself. When morning sunlight strikes your eyes, it is not only your vision that awakens, a direct signal travels to this hidden cluster, resetting the lantern's wick. Hormones begin to shift, melatonin dissolves back into the dark corners where it belongs, and cortisol flows gently upward like a tide, urging you toward wakefulness. By night, when light withdraws, the process reverses. Your lantern dims, melatonin rises again, and a quiet drowsiness pulls you toward bed. Even if you lived in a cave without clocks, your SCN would continue to tick, drifting slightly but still circling around the familiar length of a day. This is why jet lag feels like being pulled apart. You land in a new city, and the clocks on the walls tell you it is morning, but your body's lantern is still glowing for midnight. Meals feel mistimed, sleep arrives reluctantly, and your inner sundial and the outer sun argue for several days until they agree once more. Light is the negotiator in that argument. A well-timed walk in the sun can coax your SCN into resetting itself faster, syncing the inner lantern with the outer sky. There is something humbling in this. You might believe yourself to be free and rational, but much of your life is ruled by light on the retina and signals in a hidden speck of neurons. You are, in the gentlest sense, a sundial wrapped in skin. Every cell in your body carries its own tiny clock, ticking in rhythm with chemical cycles, but all of them look to the SCN for guidance. Like musicians in an orchestra, they can play their parts alone, but only with a conductor do they form a symphony. The world itself also keeps time, though in stranger ways. Earth is not a perfect machine. Its spin wobbles, its tides tug, its days lengthen and shorten by slivers. To keep our artificial clocks in line with this living planet, we occasionally add what is called a leap second. Imagine that. The entire world, with all its traffic signals and financial systems and digital networks, pausing together to breathe in one extra second. For most of us, the moment passes unnoticed, a ghost folded into midnight. But symbolically, it is remarkable. It is as if humanity acknowledges that despite all our clever devices, we still bow to the rhythms of Earth itself. Our machines tick in quartz and cesium, but our world turns with ocean and wind, and every so often we must stop, wait, and let her catch up. This interplay between human clocks and natural ones shows just how many layers of time surround us. On the smaller scale, your body cycles through pulses of wakefulness and rest, digestion and repair. On the larger scale, societies coordinate trains, work hours, and school bells. On the planetary scale, Earth swings through days and seasons, tilts and wobbles, all tugged by the gravity of the moon and the pull of the sun. The body's lantern is just one flame among these many, but to you, it is the most intimate. It shapes whether your eyelids grow heavy at 9 in the evening or at midnight, whether you wake refreshed or in a fog, whether you feel hungry at noon or at dusk. Consider how this influences memory. When you're sleep deprived, when your circadian lantern flickers unsteadily, your ability to lay down memories suffers. Conversations blur, facts slip, moods darken. It is as though the river of time becomes choppy and the boat of your attention cannot row smoothly across. Sleep, guided by the lantern, restores order. It lets the day's experiences settle, like snowflakes drifting gently to the ground, so that in the morning you awaken in a world rebuilt, coherent again. If you look for poetry in this, you do not have to search far. Our ancestors watched the sun rise and set, and in that simple rhythm they saw divinities, gods of light and dark. They built temples aligned with solstices, bonfires to mark equinoxes, rituals to honour the turning of the year. Long before science revealed the SCN or hormones, humans understood that their bodies were tuned to the heavens. What they sensed as sacred, we now trace in synapses and chemicals, but the ore remains the same. You are not separate from the universe, you're synchronized with it. Even in modern times, when electric light lets us extend the day far past sunset, we still feel the pull of the lantern. Too much brightness at night confuses the system. The glow of screens can convince your brain that dawn has already come, delaying sleep, shifting your rhythm. In this way, technology does not free us from natural time but often entangles us in subtler ways. We become slightly unmoored, slightly unsynced, until the cycle of light and darkness restores us once more. So tonight, as you listen, think of that small grain of rice-shaped cluster in your head. Think of it as a lantern, fueled by light, guiding you gently from one part of the day to the next. Its flame does not burn alone. It is part of a greater illumination. The earth spinning, the sun rising, the moon pulling, the tides breathing in and out. Time is not only in the sky, it is in you. And as you follow its rhythm, you're carried smoothly along the river of now. Step outside on a clear night and tilt your head back. What you see above you is not just a scatter of stars, but an orchestra of clocks, each keeping time in its own strange and patient way. Our ancestors sensed this long before they had telescopes or equations. They looked up, saw the moon swell and shrink, saw Orion return each winter, saw the slow drift of planets against the background of stars, and realized that the heavens beat a rhythm far larger than their own lives. To them, it was divine order. To us it is cosmic metronomes, ticking not in seconds or minutes but in pulses of light, rotations of planets, and the slow dance of galaxies. Among the most astonishing of these metronomes are pulsars. Imagine a star so massive that when it dies, it collapses inward until its core is smaller than a city, but so dense that a teaspoon of its material would outweigh mountains. That remnant is called a neutron star, and when it spins, sometimes hundreds of times per second, it sweeps beams of radio waves through space like the beam of a lighthouse. From Earth, we see those beams flash with incredible regularity. They are so dependable that astronomers have compared them to the most accurate clocks ever made. Some pulsars lose less than a millionth of a second of accuracy across an entire year. When you listen to their signals converted into sound, it is like hearing the tick of a perfect cosmic metronome, steady and sure, continuing long after human civilizations rise and fall. These stellar clocks remind us that time exists on scales we rarely stop to imagine. You and I live by wristwatches, smartphones, alarms that mark the hour for meetings or meals. But pulsars tick across centuries. They will continue to flash long after the words I speak now are forgotten, long after the buildings around you crumble. Their heartbeat is not tuned to the rhythm of human life, but to the larger cycle of stars and galaxies. To lie beneath them is to feel the weight of a universe that remembers longer than we ever could. And yet each star in the sky is also a kind of memory in itself. When you look up at the constellation Orion, you're not seeing the present. You're seeing messages from the past. Some of those stars are hundreds of light years away, which means the light striking your eyes tonight set out on its journey, when Galileo was still alive, or when castles stood tall in Europe, or when the first telescopes were being raised to the sky. To gaze at the stars is to leaf through a library of postcards, each one postmarked with the time it left. You may not think of yourself as a time traveller, but every night your vision carries you backward into centuries gone, carried by beams of light that have crossed the emptiness of space to arrive just now at your place on Earth. This is a form of time travel so ordinary that we forget how astonishing it is. When you watch the moon, you are seeing it not as it is now, but as it was 1 1/3 seconds ago. When you watch the sun at sunset, you're watching light that left 8 minutes earlier. If, in those minutes, the sun were to vanish, an event we need not fear for billions of years, you would still see its glow, still feel its warmth, because its last message would still be travelling toward you. The night sky is a constant reminder that we never see things as they are, only as they were. Light is time's handwriting, scattered across the dark, still arriving in an endless stream. When scientists built the global positioning system, the network of satellites that lets you navigate through cities or find hiking trails, they discovered that even here on Earth, our clocks do not keep perfect agreement. Gravity, speed, and altitude affect them. To make GPS work, engineers had to correct for these effects using Einstein's relativity, or else your directions would wander meters off course every day. This means that every time you glance at your phone for directions, you are depending not only on the stars in the sky, but on our understanding that time itself bends and sways depending on where you are. What a strange, beautiful thought, that to find your way to a cafe or to a friend's house, you rely on both the steady heartbeat of atomic clocks aboard satellites and the bending of space-time itself. The sky, quite literally, guides you by keeping time. When we compare these cosmic scales with human ones, the difference is almost beyond words. For you, a year is a cycle of seasons, a return to spring, a birthday candle, another round of holidays. For Earth, a year is one orbit around the Sun. For the Sun, circling the centre of the Milky Way, a year lasts about 225 million of our years. That means since the dinosaurs roamed, our solar system has only just made one trip around the galaxy. And still, on even larger scales, galaxies drift, collide and merge in dances that last billions of years. Against that backdrop, your heartbeat is a flicker, and yet it is also part of the same rhythm, a quiet, a drum in the same great orchestra. So, when you look at the stars tonight, remember, you're looking at clocks. Some are quick, flashing like the ticks of pulsars. Some are slow, drifting like the orbits of planets and moons. Some are unimaginably vast, measured in the stretching and folding of galaxies, and yet, all of them join together to form a grand metronome, keeping time across the universe. You need not understand every detail to feel the comfort in it. Time is not chaos. It is layered, structured, woven into the fabric of existence. You're not outside it. You're one small voice in the choir, singing along. If you wanted to design the perfect messenger for the universe, you might imagine something that could travel unfailingly, something that would never tire, never slow, never be outpaced by anything else. You might imagine a courier that carries both the story of where it has been and the means to measure how far it has travelled. In the language of science, that messenger already exists. It is light. Light is more than the brightness that lets you see. It is the heartbeat of the cosmos, the ruler against which distances are measured, the historian that records events and delivers them across the void. Without light, space would be mute and empty. With it, space becomes a theatre of messages, every star, planet and galaxy, sending out beams that weave into the tapestry you see when you look upward. One of Einstein's most elegant thought experiments is called the light clock. Imagine a tiny box with two mirrors facing each other and a photon bouncing between them. Each bounce marks a tick, back and forth, back and forth. If the box is still, the ticks are steady and vertical. But if the box is moving sideways, the photon must trace a diagonal path between mirrors. To you, outside the box, each tick now takes longer, because the photon has farther to travel. The light itself always moves at the same speed, but the geometry of its journey stretches. That stretching is time dilation, the slowing of time in motion, and the light clock explains it with a clarity that no equation can match. In this way, light becomes both ruler and metronome. Because it always moves at the same speed, it lets us measure distance with precision. Astronomers say a star is 10 light-years away, which is to say its light has travelled 10 years at light's constant speed before arriving. Light never cheats, never hurries, never lags. Its speed is fixed, and so it forms the foundation of all our measurements. Even the meter, once defined by a bar of platinum iridium in Paris, is now defined by the distance light travels in a fraction of a second. Our world, from GPS to the synchronization of the internet, is held together by this constancy. But light is also a historian. Every photon is a courier carrying the signature of its origin. The glow of a candle on your table tells you not only that a flame is burning, but when it was burning. The starlight you see above carries the stories of nuclear furnaces that may already have gone cold. The cosmic microwave background, the faint hiss of radiation that fills the universe, is the oldest photograph we possess. The light from when the cosmos was only 380,000 years old, stretched by expansion into microwaves that still wash over you as you sit listening now. To open your eyes is to open a time capsule. It is a strange thought, and perhaps a slightly dizzying one, that you never see the world as it is. You see only the world as it was, delayed by the time it takes light to reach you. Your reflection in a mirror is a fraction of a billionth of a second old. The moonlight falling across the garden is already more than a second old. The sunlight warming your skin is 8 minutes old. When you watch a faraway galaxy through a telescope, you're looking millions, even billions, of years backward, watching the faint glow of places as they were when the first humans had not yet existed. This truth makes light not only a historian, but a gentle deceiver. We walk through a gallery of illusions, never the present, always the past, but the illusion is consistent, and so we trust it. Our brains do not trouble us with the knowledge that what we see is delayed. To us, the world feels immediate. Yet hidden within every glance is the evidence that we live in a moving archive, always one step behind reality, always reaching backward even as we step forward. Light also shows us the structure of time itself. In Einstein's universe, space and time are stitched together into a fabric called space-time, and the constancy of light is what keeps that fabric from unravelling. Imagine a vast loom on which both distance and duration are woven. Light is the thread that never changes thickness, never alters pace, keeping the weave taut and consistent. Remove light, and the loom has no standard, no ruler, no metronome. With light, everything holds together. This is why scientists call light a cosmic speed limit. Nothing can outrun it, because to do so would require leaving the very fabric of space-time behind. For us, that limit is both a barrier and a gift. It means we cannot send messages instantaneously across the stars, but it also means the universe is ordered, predictable, bound together by the same thread everywhere. The constancy of light is the universe's promise of fairness. The same laws hold here as they do billions of light years away. For everyday life, this truth often hides in plain sight. You set your watch, and it depends on signals transmitted as radio waves, forms of light invisible to your eyes. You scroll through a map, and satellites send timing signals down to your phone using light as their courier. Fibre optic cables carry the internet around the world by guiding light through strands of glass. Without light, modern life would collapse into silence and disconnection. We rely on it not only for vision, but for almost every form of communication and coordination. And still, beyond all its practical uses, light keeps its role as historian most vividly in the night sky. To gaze at the Milky Way is to step into a gallery of ancient messages. Each star, each shimmer, is a testimony not just of existence, but of endurance. Some of those stars may already be gone, their cores collapsed, their planets vaporized, but their light is still mid-journey, still carrying the news of their once bright lives to you. Light preserves what would otherwise be lost, letting us see ghosts of stars that died before humans were even imagined. So, when we ask about time travel, we should remember, you're already bathed in it. Every glance, every beam of light is a form of travel into the past. You may never leap centuries in an instant, but your eyes do. In each time you look upward, you live surrounded by messages in bottles drifting across a cosmic ocean, arriving long after they were written. The historian's pen is not ink but photon, and its record is all around you. If you have ever sat on a tram or a train, or even on a bus that glides smoothly along its track, you may have had the curious sensation that the world outside is moving while you are perfectly still. The rattling of the wheels fades, the hum of the engine softens, and for a moment you feel suspended, carried forward through space as though on a quiet river. Albert Einstein, as a young man, often rode trams through Bern, the Swiss city where he worked as a patent clerk, and it was there, watching the streets and wires slide past, that he began to imagine something that would change our understanding of time forever. Picture this. A tram is gliding forward, and as it does, 2 bolts of lightning strike the ground, one at the front, one at the rear. If you're standing on the platform watching, and the strikes are equidistant from you, the flashes of light will reach your eyes at the same instant. You will say with confidence, they happened at the same time. But if you're seated on the moving tram, rolling toward the front strike and away from the rear strike, things appear differently. The light from the front bolt rushes toward you. The light from the rear bolt must chase you. To your eyes on the tram, the front flash arrives first. You would swear that the front strike happened before the rear one. Who is correct? The person on the platform? The person on the tram? The astonishing answer is both. Each one is correct in their own frame of reference, because what we call now depends on where we are and how we move. There is no universal clock hanging in the sky that keeps all events in step. There is no divine referee declaring what is simultaneous. There is only light moving at its constant pace, carrying information to observers who receive it in their own time. This realization shattered the comforting picture of a single universal present. Until Einstein, most people, including physicists, imagined that the universe ran on a shared timeline, like a great cosmic clock whose hands moved in unison for everyone. But the tram thought experiment showed that simultaneity, the idea that 2 events can truly be said to occur at the same time, is not absolute. It is relative to the motion of the observer. You might pause here and wonder what that really means for you, sitting perhaps in a chair listening quietly. The effect in your daily life is tiny, almost invisible, because the speeds at which you move are so small compared to the speed of light. But the principle is profound. It means that your sense of the present moment, the now you feel unfolding, is stitched together by your position and your motion. Someone moving differently could, in principle, stitch together a slightly different now. The present is not a razor-thin slice shared by all beings everywhere. It is a quilt of overlapping patches, each defined by its observer. Philosophers and poets have long spoken of the present as fleeting, elusive, impossible to hold. Einstein gave that intuition a scientific foundation. There is no single stage where all events line up in neat rows. Instead, each observer builds their stage from the signals that reach them. The sky does not announce a universal now. It whispers individual nows, private and relative. This might sound unsettling, as though reality itself is slipping out of reach. But you can also find comfort in it. Think of the way a concert sounds different depending on where you sit in the hall. To the listener in the front row, the violins arrive crisp and early. To the listener in the balcony, echoes and reverberations fold in. Each experience is valid, shaped by distance and position, yet the music itself remains whole. In the same way, your present moment is true for you. Another's present moment is true for them, and together they compose the full symphony of space-time. The tram experiment also explains why communication across vast distances is never instantaneous. If simultaneity were absolute, you might imagine that with a powerful enough telescope you could see what is happening right now, on a planet circling another star. But relativity tells us there is no such thing as right now across space. The only reality you can access is the one carried to you by light, delayed by the years or centuries it takes to arrive. The stars do not share our present, they send us their past. Once this truth is absorbed, the idea of a universal present becomes less a scientific description and more a psychological necessity. We cling to now because it gives our lives order. It lets us coordinate, meet at a cafe, say, let's both arrive at noon. It is practical, but not fundamental. On the deepest level, the universe is not divided into past, present, and future. It is a seamless fabric where different observers carve their own slices. Einstein once wrote, in a letter of condolence to the widow of a friend, that for those who understand relativity, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. He did not mean that our lives are unreal, or that time is meaningless. He meant that the categories we use are human conveniences, not cosmic absolutes. The tram in Bern showed him that the present moment is not something delivered from on high. It is something created by the dance of motion and light. Think about how this reshapes the question of time travel. If there is no universal now, then moving differently through space already changes how you move through time. In a sense, we're all travellers, carried along different rivers of light, never quite synchronized. What we call the present is not a single point but a region wide enough to contain our overlapping experiences. You and I in this moment are sharing one such overlap. Someone moving differently, far away, would be sharing another. And so, the tram, with its quiet wheels rolling through Bern, becomes more than a mode of transport. It becomes a lesson. That time is not a single flowing stream, but many streams woven together. To sit within one is to see one set of ripples. To sit within another is to see them differently. The universe does not flatten these into a single story. It allows them all, and in doing so, it allows us to glimpse just how strange and gentle a thing time can be. Once you accept that simultaneity is relative, that there is no single now for the entire universe, the next step feels almost natural, though it is perhaps even stranger. If different observers disagree about when lightning strikes, they may also disagree about how much time has passed between events. And this is exactly what Einstein's special relativity reveals. Moving through space changes how you experience time. In other words, the faster you move, the slower your clock ticks compared with someone standing still. That idea sounds like science fiction, but it is a truth confirmed by experiment after experiment, each one showing that time is not fixed but elastic. One of the most beautiful demonstrations comes not from machines or rockets, but from particles called muons. These are tiny cousins of the electron created high in Earth's atmosphere when cosmic rays slam into atoms. Muons are unstable. They decay after about 2/millionths of a second. That lifespan is so brief that if they were truly limited to it, almost none should survive long enough to reach Earth's surface. Yet when scientists set up detectors, they find an abundance of muons raining down. The explanation is simple yet profound. The muons are moving so fast that from our perspective, their internal clocks are running slow. Their brief lives are stretched, allowing them to cover distances they could never otherwise manage. In a way, the atmosphere becomes a natural laboratory. showing us time dilation in action every second of every day. You do not need to build a spaceship. The universe is already performing the experiment for you, in showers of invisible particles passing through your body at this very moment. Each muon is a traveller, living longer because of its motion, carrying within its fleeting existence the proof that speed reshapes time. Humans have joined this experiment too. Astronauts orbiting Earth at thousands of kilometers per hour experience time ever so slightly differently than those of us on the ground. When they return, their clocks, and even their bodies, reveal that they have aged a fraction of a second less than we have. It is not dramatic enough to notice without sensitive instruments, but it is real, measurable, and predicted precisely by relativity. To float in orbit is to become, in a small but genuine way, a traveller into the future. The famous twin paradox explores this in story form. Imagine two twins. One stays home on Earth, the other climbs aboard a spaceship and travels near the speed of light before turning back. When they reunite, the travelling twin is younger than the one who stayed. Time has passed differently for each, not because one clock was faulty, but because time itself stretched more gently along one path than the other. This is no longer just a thought experiment. High-precision atomic clocks flown on aircraft and satellites have shown the same result. Speed changes time. It is tempting to picture this as a malfunction, as if fast motion somehow damages the mechanism of timekeeping. But the truth is more subtle and more elegant. Each person, each particle, each clock experiences its own time perfectly normally. The muon feels no extension of its life. It decays in its proper 2/millionths of a second. The astronaut feels no sluggishness. Their heart still beats with familiar rhythm. It is only when we compare one frame of motion with another that the differences appear. Relativity teaches us that time is not a single river, flowing at one speed for all, but many rivers, branching and rejoining. Their currents shifting depending on how you travel. Everyday life rarely forces us to notice this, because our motions are so slow compared with the speed of light. Driving on a highway or flying in a jet barely scratches the surface. The differences are there, but they are minuscule, buried beneath the noise of ordinary clocks. Yet the principles remain true. If you could step into a spaceship and accelerate close to the speed of light, you would feel time inside the cabin moving normally. But when you returned, the world outside would have leapt forward. Friends would be older, buildings changed, generations perhaps gone. What was for you a short voyage would be for Earth an era. To bring this down to something relatable, think of a movie played at different speeds. To the characters inside the film, their story unfolds naturally with conversations, movements, and emotions all flowing in proper time. But to the projectionist, slowing or speeding the reel changes the pace of events dramatically. Neither perspective is wrong, each is correct within its frame. Motion acts like the hand on the projector's dial, stretching or compressing time as seen from another viewpoint. The muon, the astronaut, the twin, each reminds us that the pace of time is not set by a cosmic metronome outside ourselves. It is woven into the way we move. This is what makes relativity such a profound reimagining of reality. It does not simply adjust equations, it reshapes our intuition of existence. It tells us that the notion of an absolute second is like the notion of an absolute here, convenient for daily life, but not truly universal. And so, the faster you go, the slower you age, relative to those left behind. This is not a dream, not a speculation, but a fact written into the experiments of modern physics, and into the daily showers of cosmic particles overhead. Time is flexible. It bends not only under gravity, but also under speed. And this flexibility is the first step toward realizing that time travel, at least into the future, is not only possible but already happening. When you next see a plane carving a white trail across the sky, or a train rushing past on its track, you might imagine, just for a moment, that those passengers are very slightly out of sync with you, aging at a rhythm just different enough to remind us that we live in a universe where time itself is not fixed. Their journey, though ordinary, is a whisper of the greater journeys that relativity promises. When people first hear the words time travel, their imagination often leaps to the idea of stepping into a gleaming machine, pressing a lever and vanishing in a burst of light, only to reappear centuries earlier or later. Science fiction has given us endless variations of this fantasy. Swirling portals, police boxes bigger on the inside, or sleek silver ships that pierce the years like an arrow. But the truth, as it often does, turns out to be quieter and stranger. You do not need a machine built from fantasy metals to become a time traveller. Physics already allows a form of time travel, and it happens not with dramatic flashes, but with motion and patience. The simplest way to understand this is to return to the astronauts orbiting above us. Every time they circle Earth, they are moving at more than 27,000 kilometers per hour. At those speeds, the tiny effect of time dilation becomes measurable. When they come home, their watches disagree slightly with ours. They have aged a fraction of a second less. It is a small step into the future, almost imperceptible, but it is real. They are, in the most literal sense, time travellers among us. You might think that such small differences are disappointing, a pale shadow of the grand adventures promised by novels and films. But pause for a moment and consider what those seconds mean. They are a demonstration that time itself is not rigid. They show that, with enough speed and enough endurance, you could leap forward not by fractions of seconds, but by years, decades, even centuries. All it would take is a journey near the speed of a light. Imagine this. You board a spacecraft capable of travelling at 99.9% the speed of light. For you inside, the hours, days, and years would feel normal. Your meals would arrive at their usual times. Your heart would beat steadily. Your thoughts would flow as they always do. But when you returned to Earth after what felt like a few years, you would find that centuries had passed here. Civilizations would have risen and fallen, languages changed, landscapes reshaped. You would have travelled into the future, not by skipping across a portal, but by stretching your own thread of time more gently than the one woven by the planet you left behind. This possibility is not speculation. It is written into the equations of relativity and confirmed by every test we have managed to run so far. The barrier is not one of principle, but of engineering. To reach such extraordinary speeds, a spacecraft would need unimaginable amounts of energy, more fuel than we can currently conceive of carrying. Shielding would be required to protect against the bombardment of cosmic rays, which would strike with lethal force at near-light velocities. Our technology is not yet equal to the challenge, but the laws of physics are. The door to the future is open. We simply do not yet have strong enough legs to walk through it. What this tells us, though, is that time travel is not an all-or-nothing dream. It is not a question of possible or impossible, but one of scale. You and I are already slipping into the future 1 second at a time, carried forward by the steady beat of our clocks. Astronauts return from orbit having nudged that pace slightly ahead. Particles in the atmosphere stretch their short lives into improbable distances, each as a traveller, moving forward along their own path through time. The idea that forward time travel is real also changes the way we think about the phrase, time travellers among us. Perhaps it does not mean visitors arriving from distant centuries in secret machines. Perhaps it means recognising that anyone who moves differently, anyone who accelerates away and then returns, is living on a slightly shifted schedule. The difference may be small now, but in principle it could be vast. The universe does not forbid it. And here lies one of the quiet comforts of relativity. The universe is consistent. It does not play favourites. The same rules that stretch the life of a muon also stretch the lives of astronauts. The same rules that govern a twin's journey in a thought experiment would govern yours if one day you boarded a near-light ship. Physics is not whimsical. It keeps its promises, even when they sound improbable. You can think of forward time travel as a kind of deferred arrival. If you move quickly enough, You can reach the future before the future reaches you. Imagine waiting for a long train to arrive at the station. If you stay where you are, the minutes drag, but if you walk down the tracks to meet it, you arrive earlier. Time dilation is not exactly like this, but the analogy is gentle enough to capture the feeling. Motion carries you forward differently, and when you return, you find the station of time has shifted far ahead. It is worth noting, though, that this one-way ticket does not work in reverse. Relativity allows you to visit the future by travelling quickly, but it does not allow you to revisit the past. The arrow of time remains pointed forward. That is why, in all the serious discussions of time travel, the focus is on forward journeys, not backward ones. The paradoxes that arise when we try to imagine returning to yesterday are absent when we speak of leaping ahead to tomorrow. The future is open and accessible. The past remains sealed. Still, even within these limits, the fact that we can, in principle, move into the far future is extraordinary. It suggests that time travel is not a fantasy genre but a real feature of the universe, one that we are only beginning to grasp. When you lie back tonight and think about what tomorrow might bring, remember that tomorrow is not just a turn of the calendar. It is a destination, one that can be reached faster or slower depending on how you move. In this way, you are already a traveller. Every heartbeat, every breath carries you into the future. The astronauts above us are simply taking a slightly faster route, and if one day we build ships that skim the edge of light, then those who ride them will step out into futures we can only dream of. They will be time travellers in the truest sense, though still bound by the gentle, unyielding laws that govern us all. For much of human history, gravity was imagined as an invisible tug, a hand reaching down from the heavens to keep us pinned to earth. When an apple fell, when a river ran downhill, when the moon circled overhead, people spoke of a mysterious force pulling objects toward one another. Isaac Newton gave this force a mathematical form, describing it as attraction between masses. For centuries, that picture worked well enough to guide ships, aim cannons, and plot the motions of planets. But in the early 20th century, Einstein offered something different, and in some ways gentler. He said that gravity is not an invisible pull at all. It is the shape of space and the rhythm of time themselves. Imagine stretching a sheet of fabric and placing a heavy ball in its centre. The ball sinks down, and the fabric curves around it. If you roll a smaller ball nearby, it does not travel in a straight line. It spirals toward the heavier one, not because the larger ball is tugging with invisible strings, but because the fabric itself is curved. Einstein's insight was that mass and energy do this to the universe itself. They bend the fabric of space-time, and objects move along those curves. We are not being pulled toward Earth by some magical force. We are following the natural paths carved out by Earth's mass. What makes this vision even more extraordinary is that time is woven into the fabric too. When space-time bends, it is not only the path of objects in space that changes, the flow of time itself is altered. A clock deep in a valley of gravity ticks more slowly than a clock high on a hill. It is as though time thickens in the low places, like air becoming denser at the bottom of a canyon. This is not metaphorical, but measurable. Physicists have tested it using atomic clocks, which are among the most precise instruments ever built. They keep time not with gears or pendulums, but with the vibrations of atoms, steady as a heartbeat from the universe itself. When two such clocks are placed at different heights, even a difference of just a few meters, they tick at slightly different rates. The lower clock, closer to Earth's mass, runs slower. This effect, called gravitational time dilation, is so small in everyday life that you would never notice it, but it is undeniably real. If you're sitting in a chair right now, your feet are a little closer to Earth's centre than your head. That means, strictly speaking, your feet are aging more slowly than your head. The difference is unimaginably tiny, fractions of a nanosecond over your lifetime. But it exists. You're not a single person aging at a uniform pace. You're a vertical gradient of time. In a sense, you're stretched not only in space but also in temporal rhythm. This is one of the quiet wonders of general relativity. It reveals that time is not absolute, even under conditions as familiar as standing on the ground. It is easy to dismiss the differences as negligible, and in practice they are, but the principle matters. The principle tells us that time bends with space, that gravity does not merely weigh us down, but also slows our journey through the hours. We tend to think of time as a shared resource, something everyone experiences equally, but general relativity asks us to imagine instead a landscape where time pools and thins. Near heavy masses it trickles more slowly, farther away it flows more freely. Life on Earth happens inside such a pool. Our days, our years, our memories are shaped by the way Earth bends space-time around it. If Earth were denser, time would pass differently for us. If we lived farther from its mass, our clocks would beat faster. This is not just abstract theory. It has been tested on airplanes, with clocks flown around the world, ticking differently from those left on the ground. It has been tested on satellites, whose altitudes give them slightly different gravitational rhythms. Each experiment confirms that Einstein's curved space-time picture is correct. We live inside a great invisible landscape, and our lives trace its contours without our realizing. What makes this especially remarkable is how seamlessly it blends with our daily existence. You do not feel your feet aging more slowly than your head. You do not notice your watch ticking at a different rhythm when you climb a mountain. The changes are buried beneath the noise of ordinary perception, but physics allows us to see past the noise, to glimpse the subtle architecture beneath. It is like noticing the faint grain of wood beneath a polished table, or the brush strokes beneath a layer of varnish on a painting. The structure is there, even if we do not usually look closely. When Einstein said gravity is geometry, he was not being poetic. He meant it literally. Mass tells space how to curve, and curved space tells matter how to move. To live under gravity is to live in a curved landscape, not only in our motions through space, but in our pacing through time. If you could step far outside Earth's gravity well, your seconds would stretch differently. Returning would be like rejoining a rhythm you had briefly left behind. And so, when you look up at the sky tonight, consider that what keeps the moon circling is not a rope of force, but the slope of space-time itself. What keeps your body anchored to the ground is not an invisible tether, but the gentle dip in time's flow beneath your feet. What slows your clock at sea level compared with a mountaintop is not a defect in machinery, but the way gravity itself reshapes the fabric of reality. It is humbling to realize that something so subtle governs us so completely. We're creatures of curves, walking through a landscape where time itself bends underfoot. The old picture of gravity as a tug has been replaced by something stranger and more elegant. The apple does not fall because Earth pulls it down. It falls because space-time curves, and the apple is simply following the straightest path it can find. The slight slowing of time at your feet compared with your head is so subtle you could ignore it for a lifetime. But the effect of gravity on time grows dramatically near the universe's most massive and compact objects. When the stage of space-time is gently sloped here on Earth, it becomes steep and almost vertical near neutron stars and black holes. To stand near such giants is to find yourself in a world where seconds lengthen into minutes and hours into eternities, at least from the perspective of a distant observer. Consider a neutron star. These strange remnants are born when a massive star collapses in on itself after exhausting its fuel. What remains is a sphere only about 20 kilometers across but containing more mass than the Sun. Imagine cramming an entire mountain range into a teacup, and you're still far from appreciating its density. Gravity there is so strong that the crust of the star is made of matter, crushed tighter than the nuclei of atoms. If you could somehow place a clock on its surface, that clock would tick slower than one left floating in the emptiness of space. To the clock itself, nothing unusual would be felt. It would still keep time steadily. But to the rest of the universe watching from afar, it would seem to run sluggishly, like a heartbeat muffled under layers of stone. Now carry this thought to its ultimate form, the black hole. A black hole is not simply dense matter, but a region where space-time has curved so steeply that even light cannot escape. Place a clock near its event horizon, the boundary beyond which no signal returns, and from the outside you would see that clock nearly stop. Each tick would stretch longer and longer until it appeared frozen altogether. To the clock, and to anyone falling with it, time would continue normally, as smooth as ever. But to you, safely watching from a distance, it would be as if the clock had sunk into syrup so thick it could never break free. This difference is not just an oddity of mathematics, it has real consequences for how we imagine journeys near these cosmic giants. If a spacecraft orbited close to a black hole for what felt to its crew like a single year, they might return to find decades or even centuries had passed elsewhere. They would have become unwilling time travellers, dragged forward into the future simply because they lingered in the deep well of gravity. Popular films have toyed with this idea, portraying astronauts on distant planets where minutes stretch into years outside. Though dramatised, the underlying principle is grounded in Einstein's equations. Time truly does bend near the giants. It helps to think of this with a softer metaphor. Imagine pouring syrup onto a plate. Near the centre, it piles up thick and slow. At the edges, it spreads thin and quick. Gravity does this to time. Near Earth, the syrup is shallow, and the difference between your head and your feet is imperceptible. Near a neutron star, the syrup rises steep. Near a black hole, it becomes so deep that for those outside, anything entering appears to be suspended forever just above the surface. The strange beauty here is that no one's experience of time is ever broken. To the person on the neutron star, to the clock on the event horizon's edge, to the astronaut circling in peril, everything feels perfectly ordinary. A second still feels like a second. What changes is the comparison across distances, across gravitational wells. It is only when you step back and measure from afar that the distortions become breathtaking. We sometimes imagine these giants as destroyers, cosmic monsters that crush and consume, and in a sense they are. But they are also teachers, revealing truths about time that our gentle Earth could never show. They remind us that time is not absolute, not universal, but woven into the structure of space itself. Where matter is dense, time bends. Where gravity is fierce, time runs slow. The lesson is not one of terror, but of perspective. Even in their violence, these giants write poetry into the fabric of the cosmos. There is another quiet implication in this. If time runs slower near massive bodies, then the universe as a whole is a patchwork of different rhythms. Stars at galactic centres age differently than stars at the edges. Planets orbiting close to their suns live through time at a slightly different pace than those far away. The cosmos is not a single clock, but a symphony of clocks, each playing its own tempo, each shaped by the gravity surrounding it. To exist in such a universe is to be part of a music we cannot hear, but that physics allows us to sense. And here, once again, the boundary between science and philosophy softens. What does it mean that your time depends on where you stand? That your seconds are not mine, not quite, though they feel the same to both of us. Perhaps it means that universality is an illusion, that our longing for a single cosmic heartbeat is misplaced. Perhaps it means that difference is woven into the universe more deeply than we imagined, not as error, but as design. So, when we speak of neutron stars and black holes, we are not only describing exotic astronomical objects, we are describing mirrors held up to time itself. They show us what our own world hides, that gravity sculpts not only the paths of planets, but also the pace of existence. They whisper that the syrup of time is thicker than we thought, that every step into deeper gravity is a step into slower being. It can be tempting to think of relativity as something remote, a curiosity that only applies near neutron stars or black holes, far away from the rhythm of our daily lives. But the truth is, we already live in a world where relativity quietly guides us, like a stagehand in dark clothing moving props in a theatre. We don't see it directly, yet without it, the performance would collapse. Perhaps the most practical proof of this is the network of satellites orbiting high above us, the satellites that make up the global positioning system. Each GPS satellite is, at heart, a clock in the sky. It broadcasts its time signal back to Earth, and by comparing signals from multiple satellites, your phone or car can calculate its position with surprising precision. But here is the strange part. Without corrections from both special relativity and general relativity, those signals would drift, and your maps would unravel. Satellites move quickly compared to us on the ground, which means special relativity predicts their clocks tick more slowly. At the same time, they orbit higher up in Earth's weaker gravitational field, where general relativity predicts clocks tick faster. The combination of these effects changes the ticking of each satellite by tens of microseconds every single day. That might sound tiny, but in navigation terms, it is enormous. If engineers ignored relativity, your phone would think you were kilometers away from where you actually are, and the error would grow worse every hour. So each time you follow a digital arrow down a city street, you are depending on Einstein's insights. Each time you ask your phone to guide you home, you are trusting not only the satellites but the corrections made for the warping of space-time. General relativity is not just an idea from the early 20th century, tucked away in dusty textbooks. It is what lets ambulances find houses, airplanes land on runways, and hikers find trails through mountains. Without it, modern life would feel more lost than ever. This is a remarkable thing to reflect on. A theory born from abstract thought experiments about elevators in free fall and beams of light drawn on trains now lives invisibly inside every device we carry. We are surrounded by curves, and even if we do not notice them, our tools have learned to account for them. The invisible slope of time under gravity is not simply a poetic notion, but a correction factor written into code, a hidden presence behind the blue dot on your map. Beyond GPS, relativity also touches us through the discovery of gravitational waves. These are ripples in space-time itself, produced when massive objects like black holes or neutron stars collide. For decades, they existed only on paper, delicate solutions to Einstein's equations. But in 2015, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, detected the faint stretching and squeezing of space-time as two black holes merged over 1 billion light-years away. The signal lasted less than a second, yet in that instant humanity heard, for the first time, the universe breathing. Gravitational waves do not alter time in the same way that standing near a planet does, but they reveal something even deeper, that space-time itself is not fixed, not static. It ripples, it vibrates, it carries messages across impossible distances. When we detect those waves, we are listening to the echoes of events so far away that light itself has travelled for eons to reach us. It is like hearing the faint tremor of a drum struck in another room, knowing that space itself is the drum. Together, GPS corrections and gravitational wave detections remind us that relativity is not remote. It is both the practical machinery of our maps and the poetic music of the cosmos. On one hand, it guides trucks and taxis. On the other, it reveals the merging of black holes beyond imagination. The same equations make both possible. The same curves of space-time shape both the journey to the grocery store and the collapse of stars. It is humbling to realize that we live inside such a clockwork, not one made of gears and cogs, but of geometry and waves. Every step you take is measured against curves you cannot see. Every breath of the universe is registered in ripples too faint for your senses, but not too faint for our instruments. You're a creature moving through this cosmic mechanism, as dependent on its invisible order as a pendulum is on gravity. And perhaps this is the gentlest lesson, that relativity does not only belong to scientists in labs or astronauts in space. It belongs to all of us, here and now. It is the reason our devices point us in the right direction. It is the reason we can know about cataclysmic dances of black holes. It is the reason we can say, with quiet confidence, that gravity is not a pull, but a curve. We live not in a simple world of tugs and pushes, but in a symphony of bending and flowing. So the next time you watch your location dot drift across a map, pause for a moment. Consider that you are watching general relativity at work disguised as convenience. Consider that the same mathematics guiding you to the nearest cafe also tells us about ripples born when two giants spiral together long before Earth even formed. This is what it means to live in a curved universe. The practical and the profound are woven together, each tick of a satellite's clock tied to the breath of space-time itself. For centuries, our instinct has been to imagine the world as a collection of separate things. Apples, planets, chairs, stars, and even moments of time are pictured as independent objects, each existing on its own. In such a view, relationships are secondary, like invisible strings tying the already solid pieces together. But quantum physics has offered a different picture, one that unsettles our habits of thought. It whispers that perhaps the relations come first, and the objects themselves are only shadows of those deeper connections. The phenomenon of quantum entanglement is the clearest doorway into this idea. When two particles become entangled, their states are no longer separate. Measure one, and you immediately know something about the other, even if they are galaxies apart. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, because it seemed to break all the rules of locality and independence. But modern experiments have confirmed again and again the correlations are real. What is striking is that no message or signal flies between the two particles. Instead, it seems more natural to say that they were never truly two separate things at all. They are part of one relational whole. To understand this, it helps to think in terms of music. Imagine a choir singing without a conductor. No single singer dictates the tempo, but harmony emerges as each voice listens to the others. The music exists not because each singer is independent, but because they are interdependent. The melody is not carried by one alone, but by the web of relationships between them. In much the same way, entangled particles suggest that reality itself may be a choir without a conductor. The universe is not a set of isolated instruments playing on their own, but an ensemble in which patterns emerge from the interplay. This view leads to a daring suggestion. Maybe time itself is not fundamental. Perhaps time, like harmony, is something that arises from correlations. When one event is linked to another, and then to another, the pattern feels like a flow. The sequence of correlations becomes the river we call time. But strip away the relations, and the very sense of before and after might dissolve. Such ideas sound strange because our daily lives are filled with clocks and calendars. We wake, we work, we sleep, and each hour feels like a bead sliding on a string. But in quantum physics, there may be no single string, only the beads weaving patterns with one another. What we experience as the ticking of time may be an emergent property of those patterns. To say it differently, time could be less like a backdrop stage and more like the dance itself, visible only when dancers move together. Physicists have tried to make this more precise. Some theories argue that the universe at its deepest level might not include time as a basic ingredient. Instead, what exists are relations between quantum states. The flow of time, the passage from one moment to the next, emerges only when enough of these relations build up into a coherent rhythm. It is like noticing waves on the surface of the ocean. The water molecules are just moving in their own local ways, but when seen together, they produce the rolling pattern we call a wave. Similarly, the universe's correlations may produce the rolling pattern we call time. For us, this has curious consequences. It means that our experience of now may not be carved into the fabric of the cosmos, but may be a construction born from the way our brains, bodies, and environments interact. The sensation of a present moment could be like the harmony of the choir, not stored anywhere, not absolute, but emerging whenever the parts come together. Of course, this does not make our sense of time less real. The harmony of the choir is real, even if no single voice carries it. The rolling of waves is real, even if no single molecule knows it is part of a wave. In the same way, our lived time is real, even if it is emergent. What it is not, perhaps, is fundamental. The philosophical weight of this shift is heavy. It suggests that what we take for granted as the deepest fabric, the ticking of seconds, may instead be a higher level pattern, like a story told from fragments. We live inside that story, and it feels continuous, but beneath it may be something even more mysterious, something relational and timeless. Here we encounter both wonder and humility. On one hand, it means we are participants in something larger than we can see, woven into correlations that extend across the universe. On the other hand, it means that the security we feel in the march of time may be less absolute than we imagined. What we call before and after may be local dialects of a language written in relations rather than moments. And perhaps that is why entanglement has always captured the imagination beyond physics. It feels like a metaphor for intimacy, for memory, for the threads that bind us to one another. When two particles are linked across space, we cannot help but see ourselves in them, remembering someone far away yet still connected, or recalling a past self that feels both gone and strangely present. The science is rigorous, but the imagery it evokes touches something deeply human. So when we say that relations might come first, we're not only describing equations, we're whispering a new way of seeing. The universe may not be a warehouse of objects stacked side by side in time. It may be a weaving of relations, a pattern that gives birth to rhythm, a choir without a conductor singing the song we call reality. And in that song, time itself may be no more fundamental than the harmony. It is the music of the connections, and like music, it is real precisely because it emerges. When people hear that quantum physics sometimes allows the future to influence the past, imaginations run wild. It sounds like a keyhole to time travel, a chance to send secret notes backward through the corridors of history, or to rewrite the lines of a story already told. The truth, as is often the case in science, is more delicate, less dramatic, and yet quietly profound. What we call retrocausality, the suggestion that later events might ripple back into earlier ones, emerges not as an open door to paradox, but as a shimmering mirage, a reminder that quantum mechanics does not follow the ordinary grammar of cause and effect. One way this appears is through what physicists call post-selection experiments. Imagine you have a deck of cards, and you allow a friend to shuffle and draw, without you seeing which card they chose. Now, instead of looking right away, you decide to peek only after you know some later condition. Say, you will only reveal the card if your friend draws a heart on a second try. When you look back at the first draw, it feels as though your choice to reveal later has changed the meaning of the earlier moment. In quantum physics, a similar structure can be arranged. The outcome of a measurement seems to depend not just on what happened before, but on what you choose to measure after. This creates the illusion of a do-over. If you know the ending, you can reframe the beginning. In mathematics, the probabilities shift when you condition them on later events, and it feels as though the past is rewritten. But the important word here is feels. The past itself has not changed, only your description of it has gained new context. It is as if you heard a mysterious line in a play, confusing at first, that only made sense when you reached the final act. The line was always the same, but its meaning seemed to travel backward, reshaping your memory of what you had heard. In quantum physics, this play of context happens with particles and photons. There are experiments where a particle seems to take multiple paths at once, and only when you later decide what kind of measurement to perform does it appear as though the earlier path knew in advance. This can sound like sorcery, as though the particle anticipated your choice. But really, the particle followed the rules of quantum uncertainty all along. It was our interpretation, framed by later conditions, that gave the impression of retroactive change. Philosophers and physicists alike debate how best to describe this. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics flirt with the language of retrocausality, suggesting that cause and effect might be less rigid than we think. Others argue that nothing of the kind is happening, that what we see is a statistical trick wrapped in exotic clothing. In either case, the paradoxes that haunt science fiction, killing your grandfather before you're born, sending warnings to prevent disasters, erasing your own footsteps, remain impossible. Nature seems to enforce a deeper consistency, a quiet law that keeps history from unravelling into contradiction. To picture this in a gentler way, imagine standing in a canyon and shouting a word. The echo comes back a few seconds later, but it seems to carry a new weight, as though the canyon itself had spoken. If you had not shouted, the echo would never exist, and yet once it does, it feels as if the canyon had always been waiting to respond. The illusion is one of timing. The echo does not travel into your past, it is simply your present experience coloured by a return wave. Quantum post-selection is a little like that. It feels backward, but it is not. It is a loop of context, not a reversal of cause. For us living in everyday time, these experiments offer a lesson less about time travel and more about humility. They remind us that our sense of causality, the arrow that points forward from past to future, is a local habit, not necessarily the only way the universe can organise itself. At the quantum scale, where probabilities blur and outcomes interfere, the arrow becomes harder to trace. It bends, it loops, it flickers, though it never truly breaks. And yet, even here, consistency rules. We never observe contradictions. We never witness a signal that genuinely arrives before it was sent. The whispers of retrocausality remain whispers, like a dream half remembered upon waking. They inspire thought experiments, stir philosophy, and feed the stories we tell about bending time. But they do not provide tools for altering what has already been lived. It is worth noting how human this impulse is, to seek ways to redo the past. Every one of us has moments we wish we could revisit, words we would unsay, paths we would choose differently. Quantum do-over illusions seem to dangle that fantasy in front of us, to suggest that perhaps the cosmos itself allows second chances. But what science tells us, gently but firmly, is that those chances are illusions. The past is remarkably stable. What changes is our perspective, the way later knowledge reframes earlier understanding. This is not a loss, but a gift. It means that life, like physics, is consistent. We may not get to rewrite, but we do get to reinterpret. Our memories are not fixed photographs, but living paintings, colours deepening and fading as new light falls on them. In that sense, we're always editing not the past itself, but our story of it. Quantum mechanics, in its strange post-selections, reminds us that meaning is not fixed in time, but can be recast as we move forward. So when you hear that the future might influence the past in quantum physics, think less of paradox and more of perspective. Think of a play whose first scene grows richer when you know the ending. Think of a canyon echo that feels like a voice from before but is really just your own voice returning. These are not cheats of reality, but invitations to see cause and effect as more layered than we once believed. The flow of time remains intact, but the story it tells can shimmer with unexpected depth. When you step back far enough from the details of physics, past the sharp edges of equations and the debates over interpretations, what remains is a more fundamental question. What is time? Is it a river that carries us forward? Is it a solid landscape where all moments exist at once? Or is it something else entirely? Something we stitch together as a story, one page at a time? Physicists sometimes describe a view called the block universe. In this picture, past, present, and future all coexist. The Big Bang, the moment of your birth, and the last sunset Earth will ever see are all laid out side by side like photographs in a cosmic album. From this perspective, the flow of time is an illusion. You, right now, reading these words, are simply located in one region of this album, while your younger self and your older self exist in their respective places. Nothing is lost, nothing is gained. The entire tapestry is already there. At first glance, this is unsettling. It suggests that free will is a trick, that the future is as fixed as the past, and that our sense of motion through time is no more real than the sense of a film reel moving when in truth every frame is already printed. But for some, the block universe offers comfort too. It says that every moment is eternal. The laughter of a child, the sight of the stars, the words of a loved one, none of these vanish into nothing. They remain, embedded in the fabric of space-time, preserved forever. In contrast, our lived experience insists on time as a flow. We do not feel ourselves stretched across an album. We feel ourselves moving, frame by frame, through the reel. The present seems to advance, carving itself out of a fixed past and into an open future. Our decisions matter precisely because the future is not yet written, because the page we're about to turn is still blank. This tension between the block universe and the flowing time of experience is one of the oldest puzzles in physics and philosophy. It may be that both are true in different senses. The block universe describes the mathematical structure, the timeless geometry. The flow describes the way conscious beings, bound to memory and anticipation, live within that structure. One is the map, the other is the journey. To soften this picture, think of reading a novel. When you hold the book in your hands, the entire story exists at once, from the opening line to the last word. The characters' fates are sealed, their arcs already inscribed. Yet as you read, you do not experience the story all at once. You move line by line, page by page, carried by suspense, hope, and curiosity. Each moment feels alive because it is not yet revealed to you, even though it is already there in the pages ahead. That is the paradox of time. The universe may be a book already written, but we live it as readers, not as authors who see all at once. This is why now matters, even in a block universe. The present is the page your attention is resting on. You cannot leap forward to the ending without spoiling the story. You cannot flip backward and change earlier chapters. You can only inhabit this page, this line, this word. And that makes the lived present not an illusion but a reality of its own kind. Without it, meaning would vanish. Action requires a present. Memory requires a past. Hope requires a future. Our consciousness is built to hold these three together in a delicate balance, like a juggler keeping three balls in the air. The block universe may exist in its stillness, but life itself is in the juggling. It is in the act of holding on, letting go, and anticipating the next catch. Even physics, when practiced by scientists, depends on this lived flow. Equations are solved in sequence. Experiments are planned and then carried out. Data is recorded, then analysed, then shared. A block universe may describe the totality, but the process of doing science belongs firmly to the flowing now. Without the page-by-page unfolding, there would be no inquiry, no discovery, no wonder, and so we find ourselves in a middle place. The universe might be timeless in its foundation, yet our perspective within it gives rise to time as motion, as change, as experience. The block universe may be the mountain viewed from afar, while flowing time is the path that winds upward, one step at a time. Both views are true, but in different registers. This duality offers both humility and reassurance. If the block view is right, then the moments we love are eternal. If the flow view is right, then the choices we make matter deeply. Either way, the story of time is not diminished but enriched. It contains permanence and impermanence, certainty and freedom, geometry and poetry. So when you think about time, whether as a solid block or as a flowing river, remember that your experience of now is irreplaceable. It is the point of contact between the timeless and the lived. It is the place where mathematics and memory meet. Without the now, the book would remain closed, and the story would never be read. With it, the universe comes alive, page by page, heartbeat by heartbeat. Think for a moment about your earliest memory. Perhaps it is the smell of something baking in a kitchen, or the feel of grass against your legs on a summer day, or the sight of a toy you loved but can no longer find. If you return to that memory now, it might feel like a faded photograph tucked in an album. You may imagine that your brain has stored it carefully, like a film kept in an archive, waiting to be replayed. But that image, comforting as it is not how memory works. Memory does not keep perfect recordings. Instead, it rebuilds. Every time you recall a moment, your brain is not pulling out a pristine reel of film, but is painting the picture anew, brushstroke by brushstroke. Details shift, some fade, others are borrowed from later experiences. The smell you remember may not have been there at all. The colour of the toy may be tinted by what you saw years afterward. The voice of a loved one may blend with echoes from other conversations. Memory is not a vault. It is a workshop, alive and active each time you visit it. This is why two siblings can argue about the same childhood event and both feel certain they are right. Each has rebuilt the scene in their own mind, using the scaffolding of truth but filling in the spaces with imagination, emotion and fragments from other days. The science of memory shows that when you remember, you're also editing. In that act of editing, the memory changes, sometimes subtly, sometimes profoundly. And yet, this imperfection is not a flaw. It is what makes memory useful. The same networks in the brain that reconstruct the past are also used to imagine the future. Neuroscientists call this mental time travel. When you picture what might happen tomorrow, or in 10 years, your mind leans on the machinery it uses to recall yesterday. The hippocampus and surrounding regions act as stagehands, rearranging props, setting the lighting, and improvising new lines, using old material as their source. In a sense, imagination is memory in disguise. This is why people who suffer damage to memory circuits often struggle not only to recall the past, but also to envision the future. Without a flexible system of reconstruction, the mind loses its ability to project forward. We are built not to replay, but to simulate. We carry with us a workshop of scenes and characters stitched together into possibilities. It is what allows us to plan, to dream, and to hope. Emotion is the glue that holds these reconstructions together. Not all memories are equal. You might not remember what you ate for lunch last Tuesday, but you remember the day you fell in love, the day you lost someone, the day you stood in awe at something bigger than yourself. Emotion tells the brain, this matters, keep this one. It is why the smell of a certain perfume can send you reeling back to a moment you thought you had forgotten, or why a single note of music can reopen a scene you thought was lost. There is a beauty in this fragility. Memory, with all its cracks and edits, mirrors the flow of time itself. Just as the arrow of time moves forward and never backward, memory reconstructs rather than replays. Once a moment has passed, it can never be restored exactly as it was. But like an artist revisiting the same subject, the mind can paint it again and again, each time with subtle changes that reflect the present as much as the past. Think of a beloved story you've read more than once. The words on the page are unchanged, but your reading of them shifts as you grow. A sentence that once felt ordinary might suddenly move you to tears. A character you dismissed before might now feel familiar. The story has not changed, but you have, and so your experience of it is different. Memory is much the same. The moment itself is gone, but the act of remembering allows you to weave it back into your life in new ways. This constant rebuilding also explains why memory can be both a gift and a burden. Traumatic memories, painted over and over, can hold a person captive, each recollection deepening the grooves rather than softening them. Yet even then, the flexibility of memory offers paths to healing. With therapy, with time, with new experiences, the reconstruction can shift, the emotional glue can weaken, and the memory can take on a gentler shade. When we think about time travelers, we often picture machines and wormholes, but in truth, we all carry time machines inside us. With a thought, you can return decades into your past. With another, you can leap into imagined futures. The leaps may not be literal, but they are powerful. They shape who you are, how you act, and what you hope for. In this sense, memory is not a simple archive, but a bridge, spanning the arrow of time, giving you the ability to step forward and back in imagination, even as your body moves steadily onward. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you might feel comfort in this. The mind is not a passive storehouse, but a living artist. Your memories are not brittle tapes at risk of breaking, but canvases that can be revisited and repainted. Each time you recall, you change not only the memory, but also yourself, folding the past into the present and using both to imagine the future. Memory rebuilds, not replays, and in that rebuilding lies both the fragility of forgetting and the strength of becoming. Every so often, in the middle of an ordinary day, something unusual happens. You turn a corner, hear a friend's voice, or pick up a cup of tea, and suddenly you are struck by the uncanny sense that you have lived this exact moment before. The furniture is the same, the light feels identical, even the rhythm of your breath seems rehearsed. The experience may last only a few seconds, but its force can be unsettling, as if reality itself has hiccuped. This is déjà vu, the strange sensation of familiarity without memory. For centuries, people have treated déjà vu as a mystery, a hint that perhaps life is not as linear as it seems. Writers have imagined it as a message from past lives. Philosophers have toyed with the idea that it signals a world repeating itself in endless cycles. And ordinary people, caught in its grip, often whisper to themselves, "What if this really has happened before?" But neuroscience suggests something gentler, more human, and more easily explained. The brain is a vast orchestra, with many sections playing together: vision, hearing, motion, memory, emotion. Most of the time, they keep to the same tempo. Signals arrive in rhythm, and the conductor of consciousness binds them into a coherent experience. But sometimes, just for a moment, the instruments fall slightly out of sync. A perception arrives a fraction of a second late, slipping into the memory system just as the original experience is being processed. The result is a peculiar overlap. The brain registers the present as if it were already remembered. It feels familiar, though you know it cannot be. This desynchronization is one explanation for déjà vu. It is less like reliving the past and more like two mirrors reflecting each other. The present moment bounces back into your awareness twice, so close together that you mistake one for a memory. The feeling is uncanny not because it proves time has looped, but because your brain has briefly looped itself. Another possibility comes from the world of dreams. We know that sleep is not a quiet state, but a theatre where memory fragments are replayed, stitched together and rehearsed. Many dreams slip away on waking, vanishing before the first sip of morning tea, but some fragments linger in the unconscious, waiting for a cue. Later, in waking life, When you encounter a scene that resembles the forgotten dream, it feels hauntingly familiar. You do not recall the dream, but your body and mind recognize the echo. Déjà vu, in this view, is not the past repeating, but a dream reaching forward, brushing against the present. And yet, despite these scientific explanations, the poetry of déjà vu remains. When the moment grips you, it is hard not to wonder, what if there are parallel timelines, slightly out of step with one another? What if you are brushing shoulders with another version of yourself, living a life almost identical but not quite? These are not claims of physics, but gentle musings, bedtime stories we tell ourselves when the world feels a little too strange to fit neatly into equations. The imagination loves to wander where science must tread carefully. Even within science, déjà vu holds its allure. Researchers study it not because it proves parallel universes, but because it reveals the fragile precision of the brain's timekeeping. Every thought, every perception, relies on a choreography measured in milliseconds. When that choreography falters, the curtain slips, and we glimpse the machinery behind our sense of time. In those moments, the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and the reliable flow of experience reminds us how delicate it really is. To picture déjà vu, imagine walking through a grand art gallery. Each painting is a moment in your life, hung in sequence along a hallway. Most days, you stroll through without confusion, moving from one frame to the next. But occasionally, two paintings are hung too close together, their colours blending, their edges overlapping. For a brief instant, you cannot tell which painting you're looking at. You feel as if you have seen it before, because you almost have. Déjà vu is that overlap in the gallery of memory, a trick of perspective rather than proof of repetition. It is easy to see why humans have always found meaning in this small glitch. It reminds us of the fragility of time, of how little we truly grasp the machinery of perception. In a life often driven by routine, déjà vu is a sudden crack in the wall of certainty. It makes us pause, if only for a heartbeat, to consider that the world may be layered in ways we do not yet understand. And whether the explanation is neural misfire, dream echo, or imagination, the experience remains valuable. It is a reminder that the mind itself is a mystery, and that even in the most ordinary moment, wonder can arrive unannounced. So the next time déjà vu finds you, instead of brushing it aside, you might let it linger for a breath. Feel the strangeness of the familiar. Let it remind you that memory and perception are partners in a fragile dance. Let it invite you to step lightly into the poetry of possibility, where science and imagination meet. For even if the moment is only a glitch, it is a beautiful glitch, a fleeting spark that shows how mysterious your own sense of time really is. If you were to watch a film of the world played backward, you would notice quickly that something was wrong. Broken cups would leap back together, smoke would curl down from the sky into the chimney, tea would rise from the table, steaming hotter and hotter until it climbed back into the kettle. None of these things ever happen in the world we know. Time, as we live it, has a direction. It flows forward, from past to future, never the other way around. But why? The deep reason lies in a word that sounds technical but describes something you feel every day: entropy. Entropy is often called a measure of disorder, but it is more accurate to think of it as a measure of possibilities. A cup of tea sitting hot on the table has only a few possible arrangements. The heat molecules are mostly in the tea and not in the room, but as the tea cools, the possibilities multiply. Heat spreads out into the air, molecules jostle in countless ways, and the system as a whole becomes more disordered, more likely. Entropy has increased. This increase gives time its arrow. The universe does not forbid a cup from reheating itself, but the odds are so astronomically small that it may as well be impossible. It is as if the deck of reality is always being shuffled, and though it is not forbidden for all the cards to fall back into perfect order, it almost never happens. Entropy is the silent statistician behind the curtain, guiding the play of time without needing to write a single law. you can see entropy's handiwork in every corner of daily life. An ice cube melts in a glass, never reforms on its own. A child grows into an adult, never the other way around. A fallen leaf crumbles to dust, but dust does not gather itself into a leaf again. Each example is a reminder that the universe allows only one direction of change. That direction is what we call time's arrow. Even the stars obey it. Our sun burns hydrogen into helium, slowly transforming its fuel into heat and light that drift outward across space. Once spent, those atoms will never leap back into place, never rewind to the tidy beginnings of the star. Galaxies themselves drift farther apart as the universe expands, carrying with them the imprint of entropy on a cosmic scale. The story of everything we see is one of dispersal, spreading, and growing complexity. And yet, there is a puzzle hidden inside all this. If entropy is always increasing, then the universe must have begun in a state of extremely low entropy. How strange that the cosmos, vast and chaotic as it is today, began as something simple and ordered. That initial simplicity is what allows everything else to unfold. Without it, memory would not exist, because memory itself depends on change. A brain can only record something if the universe has a way of distinguishing before from after. The very act of remembering relies on entropy increasing, one molecular arrangement giving way to another. This is why your memories face backward in time and not forward. You can remember yesterday but not tomorrow because entropy has already marked yesterday with the weight of possibilities, leaving its trace in your neurons. Tomorrow has not yet been written into those patterns. In this way, the arrow of time is also the arrow of memory. The future remains open, the past remains closed, and the present is the narrow edge where one transforms into the other. It is tempting to imagine time as a river, flowing forward without pause. But it is just as accurate to imagine it as a tapestry being woven. Each new thread locks into place, making the pattern richer and more complex, while the loose strands of the future remain unwoven. Once a section has been woven, it cannot be undone without unravelling the whole cloth. Entropy is the weaver's hand, moving steadily across the loom. Philosophers sometimes wonder whether time's arrow is real, or whether it is simply the result of our limited perspective. Perhaps, in some ultimate sense, the universe is a timeless whole, with past and future coexisting. But for us, embedded in the increase of entropy, the arrow is as real as breath. We are creatures of the forward flow. We cannot help but walk from birth toward death, from order toward disorder, carried by a current we did not choose. And yet, there is comfort in this inevitability. The same arrow that leads a cup to break also allows galaxies to form, stars to shine, and life to emerge. Entropy does not only destroy, it also creates. By spreading energy out, it makes room for complexity. The tea may cool, but the cooling air swirls into patterns. The leaf may crumble, but the soil it returns to nourishes new growth. The very universe that ensures endings also ensures beginnings. So as you sip a warm drink, or watch the steam drift upward and vanish, you are watching the arrow of time at work. It is there in every falling leaf, every tide that retreats, every sigh that fades into silence. It is there in the stars above and in the thoughts you carry inside, and though it points only one way, it does not hurry. It asks only that you walk with it, step by step, thread by thread, into the unfolding tapestry of possibility. When most people imagine time travel, they picture dazzling machines with whirring gears, glowing portals, and dramatic leaps into centuries long gone or yet to come. But in truth, the first answer science gives us about time travel is simple, gentle, and entirely real. Yes, we can. Not in the extravagant cinematic sense, but in the quiet, measurable drift of clocks that ticks all around us every day. Time travel, it turns out, is already woven into the world we inhabit. Begin with the astronauts. When they orbit Earth aboard the International Space Station, they circle the planet at speeds of nearly 28,000 kilometers per hour. To their eyes, time seems to flow normally. They eat, work, laugh, and sleep. But compared with us here on Earth's surface, their clocks run just a little more slowly. When they return home, careful measurements show that they have aged ever so slightly less than those who stayed behind. A few milliseconds here, a fraction of a second there. Small differences, yes, but real ones. Those astronauts are time travelers, stepping forward into the future more slowly than we are. The same is true, though in the opposite direction, for people who live on mountaintops. High above sea level, gravity's pull is weaker. Clocks in the mountains tick a touch faster than those down at the shore. If you spent your life perched on a Himalayan peak while your twin lived by the sea, you would both feel the same sunrises and sunsets, but at the end of a lifetime, your clocks would not agree. You would be older by a fraction of a second. Two twins, two different journeys, two slightly diverging futures. Again, time travel, quiet and steady. The story continues every time you use your phone to check a map. The GPS satellites above your head carry atomic clocks that must account for both their high speed and their altitude. Without adjustments, their sense of time would drift so much that your directions would fail within minutes. Relativity is not just an abstract curiosity. It is the reason you can find the nearest cafe or meet a friend at the right corner. Each time you navigate, you're leaning on the careful balancing act of time travelers in orbit. The differences may sound tiny, but they remind us of something profound. Time is not a universal beat, the same everywhere, always. It stretches and contracts depending on motion and gravity. We live in a universe where time is elastic, where every journey is a slightly different story. Time travel is not a break in the rules, but a consequence of the rules themselves. And so when someone asks if time travel is possible, the most honest answer is yes, but perhaps not in the way they expect. You do not need a machine or a wormhole. You need only to move, to climb, to orbit. The physics that bends time does not hide in laboratories. It greets you in every sunrise over the sea and every satellite in the sky. Think of a river. Most of the time, we imagine that everyone stands in the same current, drifting together at the same speed. But in reality, the river has eddies, swirls, and slower backwaters. A leaf caught in one part of the current drifts differently than a leaf caught in another. Our lives too are carried by a river of time that is not uniform. Some drift slightly ahead, some slightly behind. We do not notice it day to day, but over lifetimes the differences add up. In this way, the phrase time travelers among us takes on a new meaning. The astronauts who return a whisper younger, the mountaintop dwellers who age a breath faster, the satellites above our heads, each of them is proof that time can bend. None of them carry postcards from the future, but they all show us that the future does not arrive in perfect synchrony. It arrives in gentle, staggered steps. Forward travel is the only kind we can confirm with certainty. To go back, to retrace a path into yesterday, brings paradoxes and puzzles that physics has not resolved. But to go forward faster or slower, to tilt the flow of time even slightly, is not only allowed but unavoidable. You're already doing it. Every heartbeat is a step into the future, unique to your position and your speed. So when we speak of time travel, we need not wait for the invention of impossible machines. We can instead look around and realize that we are already participants. The Earth itself is a vessel moving through the fabric of space-time, carrying us onward. The astronauts, the mountain climbers, even you reading these words, they're all on slightly different voyages, each stretching or contracting time in ways that can be measured with care. And there is something quietly comforting about this truth. We do not need to escape the present to experience the wonder of time travel. We need only to notice that time is not absolute, that the universe carries us each on our own gentle trajectory. When you look at the night sky, you're not only seeing starlight from the past, you're also feeling the subtle stretching of your own present. You're a time traveller already, whether you know it or not. So, yes, the answer is simple. Yes, we can say time travel exists. Not as grand spectacle, but as quiet fact. A fact hidden in the ticking of clocks, the arcs of satellites, the pull of mountains, the paths of astronauts. A fact that reminds us, the river of time is not one single stream. It is many winding together, each carrying us just a little differently toward tomorrow. If forward travel is a quiet yes, then backward travel is a long pause, followed by a thoughtful maybe no. The idea of stepping back into yesterday is tempting. Who would not want to relive a joyful afternoon to correct an old mistake, or to meet someone long gone? Stories thrive on this dream. Novels, films, and myths all return to the question of whether we might walk against the current of time. But when we turn to physics, the picture grows more difficult, more tangled, and perhaps more gently disappointing. One of the most hopeful ideas is the wormhole. In Einstein's equations, space-time is not rigid but flexible, capable of bending and folding. A wormhole is a shortcut, a tunnel that links two distant places, as if the universe had quietly curled the map and pressed two far apart dots together. If such a tunnel could be created, it might not only connect space but time as well. Step in at one end today, step out at the other yesterday. At least on paper, the mathematics allows it. But paper is patient in ways that the universe is not. Wormholes, if they exist, are not gentle tunnels but turbulent places, requiring forms of matter we have never seen. To hold a wormhole open, physicists suggest you would need exotic matter with negative energy density, a substance stranger than anything yet discovered. Without it, the tunnel collapses instantly, closing before a traveller could hope to pass through. In this sense, wormholes are not forbidden by the rules but guarded behind doors we do not know how to unlock. Even if those doors could be opened, backward travel brings puzzles that forward travel does not. The most famous is the grandfather paradox. Imagine stepping back in time and preventing your own grandfather from meeting your grandmother. If that happened, you would never be born, and therefore never able to travel back to prevent the meeting in the first place. The paradox loops endlessly, a story with no way to end. Physicists have suggested clever ways out of this trap. Some propose that the universe would never allow such contradictions to arise. The laws would bend events so that the past remained self-consistent. You could go back, but your actions would never erase the conditions that made your journey possible. This is called the Novikov self-consistency principle. In other words, time might be flexible, but it is not careless. It keeps its own balance, ensuring no contradiction can stand. Others propose a multiverse answer. Perhaps every attempt to change the past spins off a new branch of reality. In one universe, your grandfather survives. In another, he does not. You still exist in the first, but you only visit the second. The paradox dissolves, but at the cost of multiplying worlds beyond measure. Whether this is a solution or simply another story is unclear. And then there is Stephen Hawking's famous suggestion, called chronology protection. He once wrote, almost with a hint of humour, that the universe might have a law forbidding time travel into the past, to make the world safe for historians. His point was serious though. Quantum effects, he argued, might intervene to destabilise any attempt to form a time loop. Vacuum fluctuations could grow without bound, tearing the would-be machine apart before it could function. In just this view, backward travel is not merely difficult but naturally suppressed. The fabric of the cosmos itself resists it. It is worth pausing here to notice the difference between yes and maybe no. Forward travel emerges as a direct and gentle consequence of relativity. Move faster, climb higher, fall deeper into gravity, and time bends. It is small but measurable. It has been tested again and again. Backward travel, on the other hand, requires conditions we have never seen, substances we have never touched, and stability we cannot guarantee. It is not proven impossible, but it lives in the margins, in the speculative corners, where equations allow possibilities that the world itself may not. And yet, perhaps that is part of the wonder. Backward time travel is a dream we cannot dismiss entirely, but also cannot claim. It lives as a question, and questions have their own beauty. Even if the answer is no, the very act of asking teaches us more about the fabric of space-time, about paradox and consistency, about the strange marriage between mathematics and reality. In the end, maybe no is not a hard rejection. It is a gentle reminder that the universe may be wiser than our desires, that while it permits small, quiet slips into the future, it may protect the past with care, holding it steady so that memory can remain memory and not malleable clay. If the river of time has eddies, they swirl forward, not back. The stones we have already passed remain behind us, fixed in place, even as the current carries us on. So when we dream of backward travel, we can still enjoy the stories, the paradoxes, the playful thought experiments. They enrich the imagination and remind us of how strange time really is. But when we look to the sky, to the equations, to the measurements on our clocks, we hear the quiet voice of the universe saying, perhaps not, or perhaps never. And that too can be a comfort, for it means the story we are living can only be written once. It is a question that often finds its way into the minds of those who enjoy drifting toward the impossible. If time travellers were among us, would we even notice? Would they stride through our cities in strange clothing, their accents slightly unfamiliar, holding quiet devices that shimmer faintly in the light? Or would they blend so seamlessly into our present that we would pass them by without a second glance? Just shadows in a room we thought we knew by heart? Science, and the long silence that surrounds it, offer us a hint. The first clue is absence. If travellers from the future could come and go freely, surely there would be traces, a misplaced artifact, a letter from a century that has not yet arrived, perhaps a familiar face appearing unexpectedly in an old photograph. Yet the record of our world remains stubbornly ordinary. There are no confirmed messages, no books written before their time, no warnings carved discreetly into stone. History gives us no postcards from tomorrow. If travellers exist, they are either impossibly discreet or bound by rules that keep them from reaching us at all. This absence has not gone unexplored. Physicists have imagined that paradoxes might erase any sign of such journeys before they could be noticed, while others propose that backward travel could only ever extend to the moment the first time machine is created. In that view, the invention itself becomes a kind of gateway. You may step backward, but only as far as the instant the door was first opened, and never beyond. And if that is true, then perhaps our present moment is simply too early. No gate exists yet, and so no visitors can arrive. But maybe there is a softer explanation. Perhaps time travellers are already here, not as intruders from distant centuries, but as participants in the quiet, continuous distortions that relativity allows. The astronauts circling the Earth, aging imperceptibly slower than those below, the climbers living high in the thin air, whose clocks tick just a little faster than the ones at sea level, the satellites that drift through invisible layers of gravitational time. All of them are already travelling through time in their own subtle ways. When you meet them, you're meeting someone who has taken a slightly different route into the future, and though the difference may be measured only in milliseconds, it is real. From that perspective, the mystery softens. Time travellers are not visitors from faraway epochs. They are us. Each of us is carried along our own unique trajectory through space-time, our clocks tilted and stretched by motion, by gravity, by the simple choices of where we stand and how we move. Every breath, every heartbeat, every sunrise is a small act of travel, a gentle step into the unknown. Seen this way, the question changes. It becomes less about whether we would recognize time travelers among us, and more about whether we recognize the quiet motion within ourselves. Astronauts returning from orbit bring back proof written into their cells, their bodies fractionally younger than those who stayed behind. But you too carry evidence of your passage. You are not who you were yesterday, and not yet who you will be tomorrow. The current of time has already reshaped you, only so smoothly that you forget it is happening. Perhaps that smoothness is why we never see grand signs of travellers from tomorrow. Time, it seems, prefers silence to spectacle. It allows the universe to unfold one way only, page by page, in ink that cannot be erased. We may long for messages from the centuries ahead, yet perhaps the truest gift time gives us is the uncertainty itself, the comfort of living in a story that reveals itself only as we move through it. And still, another thought remains. If travellers could visit, would they even wish to be seen? If you came from the future, would you risk altering the world that made you? Would you display what you know, or would you sit quietly among those who came before you, watching, listening, blending in? It is possible that the greatest travellers, if they exist, have always been invisible, not because they are hidden, but because they choose not to disturb the fragile threads that connect their past to our present. Perhaps, though, the truth is simpler. Maybe we are only the early chapters of a much longer story, one whose later pages have yet to be written. Someday, our descendants may learn to bend space-time more profoundly than we can now imagine, and their journeys will begin long after we are gone. In that case, the absence of footprints is not a disappointment, but a promise that the story of time is larger than us, and that we are its beginning, not its end. So when someone asks, if time travellers were here, how would we know? The calmest answer might be, we wouldn't, or perhaps we already do. Because the travellers are here, not in gleaming suits or glowing machines, but in the satellites ticking differently, in the astronauts aging slower, in you and me, carried forward by the same gentle river. Time does not need miracles to be wondrous, its steady flow is miracle enough. In the end, the story of time travel is not one of paradoxes or hidden visitors. It is the story of motion and memory, of gravity and light, of a universe that bends time just enough to remind us that it is alive, pliable, and strange. And if one day you find yourself wishing for a message from tomorrow, pause and listen. It is already here, in the rhythm of your heartbeat, in the turning of the earth, in the starlight that began its journey long before you were born. The message is simple and eternal. You are being carried forward, always onward. The river flows, and you are part of it.